Will the much-anticipated summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un succeed? What will be the costs of failure? Can Trump and Kim get along? And what is Washington's position on some contentious issues such as denuclearization? WION's Ramesh Ramachandran gets you the American perspective. Take a look.
The Donald Trump-Kim Jong-un summit will be historic in every sense of the word. The young, brash and sometimes reckless Kim Jong-un enters history books as the first North Korean leader to set foot on South Korean soil in 6 decades. And Donald Trump becomes the first sitting American president to meet a North Korean leader. But these are two very unpredictable, temperamental, unorthodox, unconventional and non-conformist politicians. So will these two people hit it off? Is Kim serious about peace? Also, is there a method to Kim's so-called madness? I asked Mark Lippert, a former US ambassador to South Korea, and this is what he had to say.
My personal view has been that I've always felt he's rational. I think the jury is still out on how he perceives the world around him, what he perceives the United States, China, others. And I think the jury's still out in terms of how smart he is diplomatically. In other words, there have been moments, 2015, I would argue, with the aborted Moscow summit, other episodes where he did not take the Park Geun-hye government up on potential negotiations, did not take President Barack Obama up on his offers, where he's probably missed opportunities to divide a pretty serious coalition that's aligned against him. On the other hand, one could argue that he's perhaps saving up all of his big chips for a big negotiation. So I think this is really, again, one of the tests coming up between both the Inter-Korean summit forthcoming and the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Is there a grand bargain on the horizon, like giving up nuclear weapons and getting security guarantees in return to ensure that Kim Jong-un remains in power for a long time to come and does not end up becoming another Muammar Gaddafi? Listen in.
Hard to speculate on this. I think, again, this is part of the test. I would, if he says yes, then, obviously, as the Trump administration has said, the sky's the limit. But I think the question is, always the North Koreans have held a very murky definition of denuclearization that often involves giving up the U.S. nuclear security guarantees, the nuclear umbrella out here, possible withdrawal of U.S. troops. So I think really what we're focused on and should be focused on is what is his definition of denuclearization and how far, how fast will he be willing to go?
So what will it take to resolve the Korean crisis?
This isn't just a bilateral problem or issue. This isn't just an inter-Korean issue. It's a regional issue and one, quite frankly, with global implications. The Security Council's deeply involved, both in terms of the armistice and as well as the sanctions. So I think the real question to me is what is going to come out of these two summits. I think then we can talk about how you construct the other regional actors into a process and how you bring in the international players with the Security Council. But I think, the fundamental issues here are inter-Korean talks at first and then seeing where the U.S. is.
Clearly, there are more than two parties to the dispute. There are South and North Korea and the U.S., and then there is China. So the road to peace on the Korean Peninsula will pass through Beijing. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran in Seoul for WION.
And joining us on the broadcast is WION's senior correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran. He joins us live from Seoul in South Korea. Good morning, Ramesh. The Inter-Korean summit set to roll tomorrow. What's the sense on the ground in South Korea as well as North Korea? What are the anticipations? What are the expectations? And what's the mood out there?
Indeed. Good morning, Raghavendra. I'm coming to you from the media center here in Seoul, where almost 3,000 media persons are gathered behind me, as you can see. And today there is a live briefing happening as we speak, with South Korean officials briefing the media on the agenda and the program of the Inter-Korean summit, only the third of its kind to be held since 2000. Now, talking about the summit itself, tomorrow we'll see Kim Jong-un, the North Korean chairman, literally physically walk across the military demarcation line to set foot on South Korean soil for the first time in nearly 6 decades. Now, the entire proceedings will begin at 9:30 a.m. local time. That's about 6 in the morning in India, when Kim Jong-un will cross the military demarcation line and enter the joint security area, which is administered by the United Nations. And then he will walk past those blue huts that we've so familiar with in the last several years to enter South Korean soil, and in particular the Peace House, which is the venue of the third Inter-Korean summit on Friday between Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea. Now, the Panmunjom village, which houses the Peace House, has a historic significance. Now, this was the venue of the signing of the 1953 Armistice Agreement, and since then we've seen the military demarcation line become the de facto border between the north and south. As an aside, Raghavendra, Kim Jong-un will be accompanied by his sister Kim Yo-jong. Remember, this indicates the rising stature and profile of his sister. She had visited South Korea a few months ago for the inaugural ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, and we'll see her accompanying her brother again on Friday for the third Inter-Korean summit. So the stage is set as we speak for the third Inter-Korean summit, and there's a sense of anticipation among many South Koreans I interacted with over the last several days. And the least they expect as an outcome from this summit is an understanding on the way forward, or the roadmap for future peace and prosperity going forward, especially given that Moon Jae-in has invested a lot of political capital in fostering peace with North Korea. It remains to be seen whether Kim Jong-un will respond in kind and meet halfway, so to speak, with Moon Jae-in's proposals for unification and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Indeed, Ramesh, and as you said, the stage is set. The entire world is watching, and this Inter-Korean summit has evoked so much interest the world over. Now, what are the big takeaways which both the Koreas are looking forward to, and could there be something which could alter the course of history?
Well, potentially the talks could alter the course of history, Raghavendra. Remember, this is the third summit of its kind. The first was held in the year 2000, when the then South Korean President Kim Dae-jong traveled to Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un's late father Kim Jong-il for the first Inter-Korean summit. That was followed by the second Inter-Korean summit in 2007, when again the then South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun traveled to Pyongyang again for the second summit. And on Friday, we'll expect Kim Jong-un to become the first North Korean leader to set foot on South Korean soil for the third Inter-Korean summit. Now, talking about the issues at hand here, Raghavendra, there are principally or broadly 3 key issues and agenda items. The first, from South Korean perspective, is the issue of North Korea's nuclear weapons. South Korea and the US both insist that North Korea must completely, verifiably and irreversibly dismantle its nuclear weapons program and strategic weapons program. North Korea, for its part, has not committed itself yet. It says it will pursue global denuclearization and disarmament, but it's only suspended the nuclear tests and missile tests. It has not gone beyond that to give any other commitment. The second issue will be on the issue of the war that's been, technically these two countries have been in war for the last 65 years, since the 1953 armistice. The South Korean people would like the armistice to be formalized by way of a peace treaty going forward. And the third issue will be on inter-Korean relations, especially the issue of unification of the two Koreas, reducing the number of military guard posts on the demilitarized zone, the 250-kilometer wide border that crosses the demilitarized zone, and also the issue of uniting the divided families since the 1953 war. So these are the issues which will be on the agenda of the Kim Jong-un Moon Jae-in talks here on Friday.
Indeed, requesting you to hold that thought, Ramesh, and stay on with us for a while more. The Inter-Korean summit will take place tomorrow on Friday. The summit schedule has finally been released.
President Moon Jae-in and Chairman of the State Affairs Commission Kim Jong-un will meet tomorrow morning on April 27th, 9:30, who will begin their historic first meeting at the military demarcation line of Panmunjom.
North Korea's side will include a 9-member delegation, including Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong. Kim Jong-un will cross the military declaration line at 9:30 in the morning, and after the official welcoming ceremony, both countries' delegations will meet at the Peace House. If they're in there is an agreement, it will be announced in the evening. But no time has been determined as yet.
This Inter-Korean summit, above everything else, denuclearization and establishing permanent peace in the Korean Peninsula, this is the focus of this summit. North Korea's nuclear weapons and ICBM has advanced significantly. So at this point in time, reaching an agreement on denuclearization would be given the fact that in early 1990s and 2000, there were previous denuclearization agreements. However, this agreement, if it comes forth, will be quite different compared to these past agreements. That makes this summit that much more difficult. So when the special envoys visited North Korea, we confirmed their commitment to denuclearization. And so the two leaders, how much they can agree to this denuclearization and how they can actually turn this into an official document, that's a very difficult aspect. And even if there is an official agreement on denuclearization, whether there can be a consensus among the two leaders for complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, this cannot be decided by aides like us. So the substantial part, the key part of this summit meeting will be left for the two leaders who will be meeting tomorrow.
Going back to my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, who's live with us from Seoul in South Korea. Now, Ramesh, you talked about the fact that South Korea and the US are looking at denuclearization of North Korea. Kim Jong-un, as you rightly said, has not committed anything, but could there be a breakthrough on this front, if at all?
Well, that's a million-dollar question, Raghavendra. Will Kim Jong-un voluntarily give up his nuclear weapons? That's the big question confronting many South Koreans here today on the eve of the third Inter-Korean summit. From all indications, Raghavendra, Kim Jong-un has made it implicitly very clear that he will not like to voluntarily give up his nuclear weapons just yet. All that he has committed himself to is to suspend nuclear and missile tests, all further tests until further notice, as a confidence-building measure in the run-up to the third Inter-Korean summit. At the same time, reports suggest that Kim Jong-un has said in no uncertain terms that he sees nuclear weapons as an insurance policy to ensure the survival of his family's regime, so to speak, going forward for many years and decades to come. So from his perspective, he sees nuclear weapons as a defensive posture, as a means of defense and deterrence. On the other hand, South Korea, by virtue of being a treaty ally of the US, lives under the nuclear umbrella and security guarantee of the US. So any attack on South Korea will be retaliated in kind by the US. So clearly, South Korea at the same time has a benefit of having the US guarding its borders and security. That said, the issue at hand here is the following. Will Kim Jong-un commit himself in the declaration tomorrow to any sort of formulation of language which will indicate that he's open to the idea of denuclearization or disarmament going forward? As things stand today, Raghavendra, it's very difficult to predict how Kim Jong-un's mind works, because he is young, he is brash, he is sometimes reckless. And there are two politicians also, like Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. Both are unpredictable politicians. So after the Inter-Korean summit tomorrow, the next big summit will be the Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un meeting sometime in late May or early June. So these two summits will be something to watch out for, because remember, at the end of the day, the Korean crisis cannot be resolved without the involvement of the three parties: South Korea, North Korea, the US, and possibly going forward, China, because China is the big player in the region. It remains to be seen how China decides the course or alters the course of history, as to borrow your phrase, Raghavendra, in the days, months and years ahead.
Absolutely, Ramesh. And Friday is a big day. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be visiting China and meeting his counterpart Xi Jinping there. Now, as the Inter-Korean summit kicks off tomorrow, Prime Minister Modi and Jinping will also be watching that.
Absolutely. There are two things at play here, Raghavin. From India's perspective, if we talk specifically about the Korean crisis, India says India is worried about the proliferation linkages between North Korea and some countries in India's immediate neighborhood, especially Pakistan. Remember, Pakistan and North Korea have a long-standing history of collusion in far as nuclear proliferation issues concerned, and they've been at it for many, many years and decades now. That's one immediate issue from India's perspective. Other issue is, as Prime Minister Modi invests his government's policies heavily in the Indo-Pacific region, any destabilizing effect on the Korean crisis will have knock-on effect on India in terms of economy, in terms of security. So India is closely watching developments on the Korean peninsula. But that said, the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping will have other repercussions and implications for India going forward, especially at a time when we've seen last year the Doklam standoff persisted for months on end. So this will be a summit to watch out for, although informal, no declaration expected, but still we'll have to wait and watch how the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping progresses. That said, we've seen China becoming increasingly involved in the North Korean affairs, especially given the fact that Kim Jong-un made his first foreign visit abroad after coming to power in 2011, when he took that slow train to Beijing and met with Xi Jinping and in a sense sought his blessings to go ahead for the Inter-Korean summit, followed by the talks with Donald Trump in late May or early June.
Thank you, Ramesh Ramachandran, for joining us with those updates and perspective. Big day tomorrow as the Inter-Korean summit kicks off in South Korea.